Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Ted Jackson. I'm the Community Organizing Consultant at California Foundation for Independent Living Centers, and I work with the Disability Organizing Network, or what we more fondly call the DO Network. The DO Network is a program of CFILC, and it's a community organizing collaborative of folks from all over California and membership across the country, dedicated to organizing for making accessible communities wherever we live, work, learn, shop, play, and vote. Today's webinar is in our Dialogues in Disability Pride and Culture series, and it's Community Organizing with Senior Populations. I will be doing some image descriptions for you as we go along in this webinar. And on this first slide here, we do have an image of the DO Network logo. It's a large D and O, capital D, capital O in blue, and then underneath it in lowercase letters it says Network. Next to the D and O it says Disability Organizing, and there's a green rectangular box border around these letters, and in the bottom right-hand corner an arrow pointing forward. Also, all of our slides today have the branding of our guest speakers organization, the Alliance for Retired Americans, at the bottom of each of the slide. And that is a blue star. Above the blue star are two red stripes. In the faded background behind that is the United States Capitol, and in blue letters it says Alliance for Retired Americans. And then there's a series of pictures. The first one is of an Asian American senior citizen. The next one is an African American woman. The one after that seems to be a Latino senior citizen, a man, and then a woman who I think is also Latina. And then next to her is a picture of a crowd outside the United States Capitol. So with that, I am going to hand it off to Brendan Kelly, who is our presenter today. Welcome, Brendan.
Thanks so much, Ted, for inviting me to speak today, and thanks to the DO Network for inviting me and the Alliance for Retired Americans to speak with you, and thank you everyone for getting on the webinar today. I'm excited to talk about the Alliance for Retired Americans. It's a really wonderful organization. Many of you may, or some of you may be familiar with the Alliance and the work that we do in states as well as nationally. If you're not familiar, or even if you are, I think it's really important to talk about, get into the weeds about what the Alliance for Retired Americans is, because it's pretty unique as far as organizations go, and I find that once it's clear, like all of the different things that the Alliance is, then it becomes much clearer on the best ways to organize and work with our members, which are, as you may know, some of you may know, are very active retirees in municipal, state, and federal politics. So, Ted, if you could go to the next slide. So is about the Alliance for Retired Americans, and then the next slide is just our mission statement is to ensure that social and economic justice and full civil rights for all citizens, so that they may enjoy the lives of dignity, personal and family fulfillment, and security. And the Alliance believes that all older Americans and retired persons have a responsibility to strive to create a society that incorporates these goals and the rights, and that retirement provides them with the opportunities to pursue new and expanded activities with their unions, civic organizations, and their communities. If you go to the next slide. So a primary objective of the Alliance is to enroll and mobilize retired union members and other seniors and community activists in nationwide grassroots movement, advocating a progressive political and social agenda, and one that respects the work and strengthens families. Our mission is to be a voice for all older Americans and to be part of leading a progressive grassroots senior organization. Go to the next slide. So to talk a little bit about what we do. So as I mentioned, we're a nationwide coalition of community-based and retired union organizations working to advance public policy that protects the health and economic security of older Americans. And the Alliance believes that seniors must work together to preserve all that we have fought for and to fight for future generations, for a future that generations of Americans deserve. And so to that end, some of the key principles that we organize ourselves around is self-awareness of the issues. So we spend a lot of time educating ourselves and our members and fellow seniors about the issues that affect our lives as well as our children and our grandchildren. We also believe strongly in self-representation with legislators. Alliance for Retired Americans members are some of the best communicators for their issues to their elected officials. We believe that strongly. So we believe in direct issue advocacy with elected officials at the local, state, and federal levels. And then we also believe in preserving our legacy through activism. So self-determination and voluntary action to make our voices heard and to protect the society that we've built. And so if any of you have organized with Alliance members, you know that we participate in public direct action as well as doing lobby visits and other forms of advocacy. If you go to the next slide. So I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but because the Alliance for Retired Americans is unique, I think I find it really important to just talk about the structure of how we're organized. So we were launched in 2001 by the AFL-CIO, which is the American Federation of Labor Congress of Industrial Organizations, along with affiliates and community groups. So we are one of the few non-union affiliates of the AFL-CIO, which makes us a labor organization but not a union. And so to that end, we have members in all 50 states, 4.3 million members, and they're organized in 35 states into state chapters, which in turn have over 1,600 local affiliates. And then membership does include union retirees, but also retirees who were not part of a union when they were working. Go to the next slide. So, and just the way this breaks down is the constituency unions of the AFL-CIO, they cover the membership dues for all of their retirees who are in turn members of the Alliance. So some examples of this are machinists, teachers, auto workers, steel workers, and people who work at supermarkets, for example. Additionally, we have another section of membership that's called the Community Action Network. That's made of individuals who they themselves pay a $10 a year membership fee. And then also there are people, and those individuals may not have ever been part of a union when they were working. And then we also have people who were part of a union when they were working, but their union does not affiliate with the Alliance, and so they also individually pay a membership fee. And then, like I said, though we have members in all 50 states and Puerto Rico, there are only in 35 states, is the alliance organized into state chapters. And if you go to the next slide, and what I mean by that is that in states, we invite members to form a state alliance, to elect a board and adopt bylaws and administer a state organization that we support with resources, but that as well as with direction and federal issue papers and direction, but that largely operate on the state level following state and local initiatives. And in that sense, the way that they are structured, I think, is the most important for those of you on the webinar today, because this is the point of entry that is sort of most accessible to people with the alliance. And that's because state alliances, though they are largely, they do largely affiliate with their state AFL-CIO unions as well as other unions, they also have the ability, which is an ability beyond what the National Alliance has, to affiliate with community organizations that are not unions. So, for example, if there was a state chapter of the DO network in California, for example, that chapter could affiliate with the California Alliance for Retired Americans and in turn, receive representation on the governing board of the state alliance. And so it's a unique power that state alliances have that we think is really important, and it's what makes a lot of our state alliances so effective in the organizing that they do. If you go to the next slide, it's just a map of where we do have state organized alliances. There's sort of one asterisk on this, is that in Alaska we don't yet have a state alliance, but if anyone on the webinar lives in Alaska, I assure you that by the end of the year we will have an organized alliance there. But in the other states, if your state is represented on the map, I would invite you to, we would like to connect you to your to the state alliance in your state if you aren't already, and I'm happy to sort of triage that through TED in connecting you on like a case-by-case basis with the state president who's in your state and the board. And then if you are living in a state that's not highlighted in red, there's where there's a will, there's a way, and in a couple of these states we're beginning to get the foundation for organizing a state alliance, and so I think that it's possible that one will be coming to your state soon.
Just really quickly, Brendan, I want to describe the image. So on this slide there is a map of the United States. Obviously the 48, I'm sorry, contiguous states, and then there's Hawaii and Alaska. Most of the states are highlighted in red, 35 of them are. Some states in the South and the Midwest and the state of Alaska are not. I think everyone on the webinar is in California, so California is highlighted in red. And so that is, we'll take you up on that offer for connections though, and I'm going to move on to the next slide.
Okay, great. Yes, and thanks for reminding me. I realize that my presentation is bereft of images. So, but yes, and it's good that everyone is in California because the California Alliance is phenomenal, and there are local chapters throughout the state that meet on a regular basis, like a monthly basis, and are engaged in a ton of activism and lobbying. And so it's never a competition of, there's no state alliance that is better than the others, but certainly the California Alliance is a leader, among equals. So that's the makeup of the Alliance for Retired Americans, and the next slide has some of the issue areas that we focus on, particularly healthcare, Medicare, prescription drugs, and Medicaid are the most important things that we talk about. And this past summer, we're involved with a ton of allies. I think that we worked with some members of the DO network throughout the country in the battle to fight back against the repeal of the ACA. It was a really humbling summer for activism in that sense. Also focused on economic security, which I know is important to everyone. So because so many of our members do come from unions with pensions, we recognize that there is sort of an impending pension crisis, and that's important to us. But we also talk every day about the importance of Social Security, poverty issues in general, and tax cuts and tax policy, which we are anticipating will be the major political campaign of the fall. Will be addressing issues of tax reform and budgets. And then also housing and services, extremely important for our members, affordable housing, long-term care, and community care. So, and we believe that the best ways to achieve our goals is by taking action together. Our structure is one of like a coalition, and we think that we work the best when we work with others. If you go to the next slide, sort of just a reiteration of our priorities to strengthen and expand Social Security, defend Medicare and Medicaid, make prescription drugs more affordable, protect public and private pensions, preserve voting rights, which is increasingly under threat for a lot of our members, and expose corporate initiatives that are harmful to retirees, workers, and their families. If you could go to the next slide. So the way we organize is summarized on the next slide. A lot of the organization is triaged through me and the Field Mobilization Department, where we we identify and put together national advocacy campaigns, and we apply them to people across the country. Like I said at the beginning, we care a lot about making sure that our members have access to the best information, and so we try to educate our members on retirement security, messaging on Social Security and Medicare, as well as elder financial abuse through presentations, toolkits, and information pieces. And the goal of all of our issue advocacy campaigns is to educate, train, mobilize, and activate Alliance members through list building and continuing engagement with our members. On the next slide is some information about our political action and the way we do it. So the Alliance members across the country are engaged in the political system at the local, state, and federal level. So here in the Field Mobilization Department, we are the hub for political organizing for Alliance members across the country. And we focus on putting together toolkits that contain resources like fact sheets, talking points. We have a full lobby toolkit of soup to nuts, how you request a lobby meeting with your representative, best practices for structuring that lobby meeting, as well as like a report pack form, so you can ask your representative or their staff specifically about the issues that are the subject of the lobby meet. And then we create a template follow-up letter that you can send to them. And we do that as well as include other pieces of campaign toolkits like sample letters to the editor and op-eds. And on the next slide, we have a full list of the types of resources that we put together. Fact sheets and legislative issue talking points. Congressional voting record is something we put out each Congress, and we have that broken up by state, so we can produce a California-specific voting record for every member of the California's federal delegation, and we rate them according to the votes that they have made on the issues that we care about. Like I mentioned, we have a legislative lobbying toolkit that we update for each major campaign. So over the summer, our members had a toolkit that was focused on healthcare and the different parts of the healthcare bill that was being decided. And just today, I was updating the lobby toolkit for potential meetings with lawmakers for the tax and budget season coming up. And we make those available to all of our affiliates, but also all of our friends. And then our campaign toolkits have things like sample letters to the editor, put together sample stump speeches, as well as op-eds. And then we also have a line of best practices toolkits. For example, we just put one together on photography for organizing, and we also take some best practices for doing new media organizing as well, just so that our members and our friends and our affiliates have some like simple how-to steps for how to be great organizers. So those are some of the resources that we produce. And on the next slide,
just really quickly, Brendan,
sure.
On this slide there is an image, and it's an image of a handbook, a resource type handbook that Brendan was talking about.
Yes, thanks. And on the next slide are a number of the ways that you can follow us online, our presence, and if it's okay, I'll read them out. Our website is www.retiredamericans.org. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/retiredamericans, and I'll make an extra plug that if you search in California for the California Alliance for Retired Americans on Facebook, they have an active Facebook page as well. We are on Twitter at Active Retirees is the handle, and we have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/retiredamericans. And then we also have a Flickr page, which is flickr.com/retiredamericans. And I want to just go back to the, I can read it, but on the beginning of the presentation was all of my contact information. While I'm talking about the ways that you can contact us, I'll read off that contact information for those of you who would like. My email address is bkelly, K-E-L-L-Y, that's like B as in Brendan, Kelly, at retiredamericans.org. And you can email me anytime with questions. And then like Ted mentioned, I'll look forward to connecting anyone with the California Alliance and getting you plugged into the activity that's happening in your neck of the woods. But with that, that's the overview of the Alliance, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that that anyone has.
Well, thank you very much, Brendan. That was really, really great information, and I think that there's a lot of ways that seniors and people with disabilities and deaf persons could be organizing and advocating together. and to be working together because we have so many common issues. We're going to open up the floor to questions. So if folks want to ask a question and you're on the phone, you can unmute your phone by pressing *6, or you can type it into the chat box and I can read it. Also, let us know that you have a question by clicking the little hand and raising your hand. And while folks are thinking about their questions, I'm going to just get us started with one while folks get ready for some questions. I noticed in the list of policy priorities that it wasn't necessarily up near the top for obvious reasons. I mean, you know, healthcare and financial security and housing are highly, highly important issues. But on your list was voting rights. And we in the disability community consider voting rights a very, very important issue because of accessibility of not just the actual polling place, but the accessibility of voter education materials, campaigns themselves. Are they delivering their message in an accessible way? But then also that people with disabilities tend to fall into some of the traps of voter suppression. They tend to be affected, for example, greatly by voter ID laws that are intended to suppress another community but affect our community in turning out to vote. So what are the what are those barriers for seniors on voting that make voting rights an important issue for them?
Yeah, it's a great question because it's some of the things that you mentioned that perhaps are significant in the community of the DO network in terms of having voter ID laws, which are in many cases new in the past couple of decades in states, disproportionately also affect seniors. And then there's also just the accessibility and ability to get to the polls that that affect seniors. And then frankly there's also a feeling that I think that of voter intimidation, that people think that if there's just the littlest small thing that they don't have the right to vote. I've heard people in our community talk about being concerned about having like a parking ticket that wasn't paid, and so they think that they can't vote. So a lot of this, I mean, some of it is just can be a matter of education and making sure that there's as much information about voting out as possible, because that leads to people feeling, I think, more comfortable about voting and more comfortable asserting their right to vote. And so to that end, we've started this summer and are hoping to have a series of resources available to our members later in this year to start the conversation about the importance of voting and also all the rights that are available to people. And it's a complicated issue because the right to vote has really varied widely in different states. And so getting all of the up-to-date information about what the laws now say in different states and disseminating that information to the right people in the right states is a task that we're looking forward to undertake. But it's my position, I understand that in addition to sort of the advocacy fights that we should be having about, the actual laws about voting, which in some parts of the country are sort of getting worse and more discriminatory, that the other side, as we get closer to Election Day, the most important thing is to be promoting what is like the rights and the true ability that every person has to cast their vote. And so to that end, that's where coalition work becomes so important, because it means taking like treaties and this information and spreading it across different organizations. So that's one of the reasons why, in addition to the population that we represent, it affects them, but also because the structure of the Alliance for Retired Americans largely being an organization of organizations, we think it's really important, something that we can help do is disseminate that information.
Awesome. So I want to let other folks ask questions. I have a couple more questions to see if folks don't have questions, but I want to give other people time. I noticed that Forrest Harlan from Disability Action Center in Chico, California, put on here that Disability Action Center, which is the Center for Independent Living, is a member of the California Alliance for Retired Americans. Forrest, did you have any questions or comments that you wanted to give?
No, I just wanted to encourage other centers to consider doing the same. That's a great way to be intersectional in our organizing efforts and get more power in the process.
Are there any other questions? Any more questions out there? So, and also I see that Resources for Independent Living, which is the Center for Independent Living in Sacramento, is also a proud member of the California Alliance for Retired Americans. Elizabeth Campbell from the Dale McIntosh Center in Orange County is asking, is there a list of organizations that are members? Is there a membership list for California somewhere?
Yes, there is, and I would be more than happy to find that, and I can share that with you. I also may, just off the top of my head, may want to check in with the California Alliance, because they probably would have the most up-to-date list, and connect you that way. But it's great to hear that affiliates of the California Alliance are represented on the call, and I just want to echo what Forrest said, that I think affiliation is just a great way to be a part of the California Alliance. And I mean, I'm always humbled by the work that the California Alliance does and that its partners do. And it's, like I said, it's truly one of the best alliances I've had the pleasure to work with. So
I'm going to go ahead and ask another question, and that was a great question, Elizabeth. Brendan, and I think for everyone on here, healthcare is obviously a huge priority. In the previous administration, we had made great strides forward in providing healthcare for more and more people in this country, but more specifically, great strides in providing, opportunities and access to healthcare for people with disabilities and seniors, so that they can live independent lives, and they could be in the home and not be institutionalized. Healthcare allowing folks to be able to go to school, being able to work, being able to be a part of the community. And already, it's less than a year of this new administration, we are seeing a lot of threats, a lot of the progress being rolled back. And what's unfortunate is that while we had all this progress in the last administration, we weren't completely there yet. We were working towards a goal and getting closer and closer to it, but we weren't completely there yet. Over the summer, we've seen the advocacy of the disability community and seniors has really been the driving force that stopped attacks on healthcare, but we know that this isn't going to stop. So when Congress comes back next week, what do you all at ARA think are going to be the next round of tactics that we're going to need to look out for and to organize to either protect ourselves, defend, or even go in some of the advocacy offensive? What are we expecting there, do you think?
Well, I have some thoughts, and I'll share them. One thing, just to go back, one of the observations that I made from this past summer that I think was a truly effective discussion point in the pushback against the repeal of the ACA was talking about home health care in terms of the dignity, but also just in terms of it being one of the better success stories, I think, that came out of the last, the previous decade. It was a message point that we talked about a lot with our members and with some of the targeted legislators in states like Arizona, Alaska, Maine, and West Virginia, that we found to be very effective. And we also found that it was such a great message to build coalitions, because so many people are either depend on home health care, or are friends with someone who does, or are related to someone who depends on home health care. It's an incredibly strong network. And so I think that building on that message point, that discussion point, I think is like the future for fighting back against future attacks to healthcare. But that being said, specifically like in the here and now, what we think we're going to see starting next week, in terms of the repeal of the ACA, we've said for all summer long that their legislative agenda looked like ultimately like zombie care, in that it just never went away. Every time we thought it was defeated, it came right back. And so we're very cautious that at any time we think that it could come back. That being said, legislatively, the avenue that they were going to use all summer long to destroy the ACA has really come to a close in the 2017 budget, which is where they were trying to sort of legislatively maneuver it, because the government is pretty much funded until the end of the 2017 fiscal year. So there's that. One of the things that we're really concerned about with the tax and budget conversation, and that's why we're sort of, and the reason why we're really involved and looking at carefully, is because we suspect that their goal will be to try to pass a tax cut for the super rich and for corporations that will effectively suspend revenue collection. And then if they can do that quickly, they will then be able to be in a position in a few months where they say, there's a crisis, we have no money, therefore we have to cut some of these critical programs like Medicare and Medicaid. So that's the way that we kind of see this playing out, and that's why we think that it will probably be important to highlight sort of what is at stake in the programs of Medicare and Medicaid when talking about the budget and tax reform in the next couple of months. That's how we're sort of seeing this playing out. So that is where we see like the most here and now threats to healthcare. But in this era, things change so quickly that it's hard for me to say for certain what will happen next. But that's the way that we think.
So I just have one last question to wrap us up. A lot of the folks on this call either work at Centers for Independent Living or disability organizations, but almost all of them work on the community organizing side. So, creating change and affecting change by organizing communities and giving them the power or supporting their power, their collective voices to speak up to the decision makers around us. And so there We're always looking to build a bigger volunteer team and build a bigger advocacy team. The question is probably pretty simple, but it's a little bit of a two-parter. One is, what is the value of having seniors on their volunteer advocacy team, and two, where do they find seniors? Where do they recruit them?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, as someone who works with seniors activists every day, I mean, what's apparent to me about some of the things that they bring to the table in terms of organizing is like a lifetime of wisdom and experience, and the savvy that brings. And so that's invaluable, and I think it's useful. Most of our members have seen you know, everything under the sun, and so their wisdom is based on that. Brass tacks, when we're talking about meeting with legislators, for whatever reason, there's a certain amount of fear that retirees instill on elected people, because it's perceived that retirees and seniors always vote. So that's also like an added benefit. I think that in terms of like where to find retirees, it's I think that the first place to go, I just want to make another pitch for the California Alliance for Retired Americans, because it's so well organized, is to go there, because it's going to be a place where you're going to find some of the most active retirees. And then the other place that I tend to look when I'm working on organizing drives and organizing projects are if there are community groups that are specifically targeted at retirees, and then also at senior centers. It's a patchwork across the country, the way that our communities treat seniors and retirees, but in most places there is a civic gathering where retirees and seniors can get together. In a lot of cases, they're brick and mortar places where people go. In some cases, they're just community centers with senior hours. But all of those, it's been my experience that all of the organized program for those types of places are always looking for guests to come and to speak and to present and to make new friends. So, I mean, those are some of the hot spots to go. But I'll make one more pitch that I think that a great place to start, because of the great work that they're doing, would be to reach out to the California Alliance for Retired Americans.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Brendan. We really appreciate you joining us today. It was a great pleasure, and I think this is a really, really good topic. As we see the things that are coming down the pike on healthcare, on notification bills that want to attack the Americans with Disabilities Act, which provides access for seniors, deaf people, and people with disabilities, and a wide variety of things like voter suppression coming down the way. We have so much more in common, and so collaborating and building coalitions and learning about one another so that we can have effective coalitions is incredibly important. To that end, I want to wrap up with a little advertisement from the DO Network. We are having our Access Now Community Organizing Summit coming up in September 28th, 2017, from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. The ticket price is $20, but we do have scholarships available for our volunteers and consumers who can't afford the ticket price. The ticket price does include some morning refreshments and lunch, and the location of the summit will be at 634 South Spring Street, Los Angeles, California, and we just hope to see you all there. On this particular slide is an advertisement for the summit. This advertisement has a graphic that has the DO Network logo. and then it has 3 fists being held in the air, and written on the arms of the 3 fists are the 3 priorities for our summit: youth transition, protecting healthcare, and protecting the Americans with Disabilities Act. And it says Access Now Community Organizing Summit. At this summit, we will discuss those 3 issues: youth transitions, protecting healthcare, and protecting the Americans with Disabilities Act. Folks will leave with some concrete details on what's coming down the pike on those issues, as well as some concrete activities that they can do, take back to their communities to keep advocating and to keep organizing to create systems change and create more inclusion for people with disabilities in their communities. Thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you on one of our future webinars. Thank you very much, folks.